My neighbor out there, mostly it's over here. And,
Welcome back.
cold, not feeling it. We're just waiting for Council Ball. Thank you for coming. I know it's quite a
Yes.
famous day ever this year.
It's fine. Timing is everything. This is fine.
Well, this way, when you say, oh, we're going to Block Island, you know, it's the summer, they go, yeah, sure you are. Yeah, the winter.
You're not gonna go home for 30 years like the rest of us. So that happens.
For many, many years, I had a business or worked at business in Connecticut. And we had one of our clients was Olive Garden, Garden restaurant.
Oh, yeah, dog.
Down in Orlando.
Yeah.
And I did everything I could to make sure that the meetings were December to February.
Yeah.
And for 12 years, I worked hard on it. They were always July and August. No matter what I did, it was like the worst. You know, so I have empathy for you. You hang out long enough, you'll get warmer.
That's what the truth is, not the way it's done.
Well, that's not so good if she's not. She's not.
Don't tell me you're not feeling well and you've got a headache and raspy.
And now, right now, we'll see what your day brings. That would mean the full schedule, the order, that's what it is. It did, the first.
Even boosted their.
I meant to,
Don't you think that's sort of the prevailing fact for people as it becomes an event? They don't know.
yeah. And I was really good, because I have to get the they left and then it's about talk to them. Nice to see that. Nice to be there, to be tested out, so. What's that?
She didn't know.
Hi, Dr. Ball. Sorry, I'm late.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, you need those to remember.
Right.
For all of those who didn't stay up and watch, I will admit that the football game was pretty good.
Very good.
I wish I was very happy at the outcome.
What?
Georgia beat Alabama.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's a.
It was a little after midnight. Georgia won the Bulldogs.
Yeah, they have a rally.
Xavier Trust.
That's it. I was educated last night. And I was told.
I really didn't have a rooting interest till I heard that there was a young man from Heaven in there. I said, okay, we'll root for Georgia.
I'll do anything to vote against. don't care who came.
One stuff matters.
Right? There you go.
It's better than So.
Well, as I said, thank you guys for coming. And I guess we'll just start by giving you the opportunity of, just letting us know what you think you might be able to do for Block Island. Yes, please step up to the mic. We are streaming on YouTube, so it's
Okay.
much better for the public to hear at home.
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you so much, council members, for the opportunity to be here, to the town manager as well. Appreciate on behalf of Penon Lopes, Devereaux, O'Gara Strategies.
Hold on 1 second.
I don't,
Yes.
It doesn't sound like your mic.
Okay,
Maybe
just get closer. Okay.
The masks don't help either.
Yeah, no, I'm getting used to it, so. First of all, thank you so much, council members, to town manager as well, for the opportunity to present to you today. I'm Alan Fung. I'm here along with my colleagues, Brian Jordan and Scott Frazier, for PLDL Strategies, in response to the RFQ that New Shoreham had put out for lobbying consulting services. I want to give you a little bit of a breadth of our organization and also a little bit about the background about us and hopefully what we can do for all of you. PLDO Strategies was formed about 15 years ago. In fact, the law firm as well as the government relations shop are all in one. And with the addition of Mr. Frazier, we have added a stronger component with the communications, particularly with respect to crisis communications. But that doesn't mean that all of our collective experiences in lobbying is limited to that 15-year period, because the main principal, Matty Lopes, as many people know him, who has helped start the firm, has had decades-long experience in lobbying, has been a partner at prior firms even before that. But our firm started because those four main principals wanted to come together, leave that big firm atmosphere, and start a smaller boutique firm that provides a comprehensive type of solution for many of our clients in both the private sector and public sector. I've been now with the firm close to a year after a 12-year tenure as mayor of Cranston. And during that time in Cranston, I faced many of the same challenges that all of you, in fact, I was there during the start of COVID, for that year-long period before I was term limited as mayor. And I was fortunate to jump along into this firm where I'm part of the state municipal law practice, but also assisting from a government relations perspective as well. And my background is both in law, business, as well as government relations, because prior to becoming mayor, I had a 8-year career as the head of government relations for MetLife Auto and Home, which is nationally headquartered, was because they were just recently purchased by Farmers, in Warwick, Rhode Island. And in that capacity, I oversaw government relations nationwide, in addition to being the lobbying arm here in Rhode Island. So walking the halls at our Marble State House up in Smith Hill is nothing new to myself, but we also have collective experiences amongst many individuals. On top of that, I also have the experience lobbying for all of you, including Block Island, during that time when I served as president of the League of Cities and Towns, because that was a vital organization where collectively all 39 cities and towns had a voice, an important voice up at that State House, most importantly, on issues that would have impacted our daily operations. But in this role as mayor, I think that's the critical experience that I provide to all of you and can bring to all of you, because I can almost guarantee you that there isn't an issue that you're facing that I haven't encountered. Even though Block Island, New Shoreham is the smallest town in our smallest state, that doesn't mean that you have the smallest voice or should have the smallest voice up on Smith Hill, up in DC, because one of the challenges that we always see is ensuring that, our clients are visible, that their needs are heard, from our perspective, and that we will be a voice for you in the General Assembly and beyond. So that's a little bit about my background and my practice, but I want to bring up both Mr. Jordan as well as Mr. Frazier, talk about how they can help in their backgrounds and what they can do before we get into the issues for New Shoreham.
Thank you, Mr. Fung.
Thank you, Alan. Brian Jordan, I have some folders here which I can distribute later that provide more information about the firm and as well as background information on ourselves and the firm we work at. So again, Brian Jordan, I've been with the Pannone Lopes Devereux O'Gara for about 10 years now. Just a quick background about myself. I am a non-attorney. I was telling somebody last week the story that my brother-in-law, who breezed through Harvard Law School, talked me out of going to law school on a Christmas ride from Mystic, Connecticut to Westbrook, Connecticut. And so I was all set to go, but he talked me out of it. So good job. I guess thank him for not having the debt either. I went to Providence College. After that, I went to Bryant University. I have 2 MBAs, one in management, one in finance. Long story short, I ran for town council in Smithfield. I lost, but at the time I was working at Blue Cross and then Vice President of Government Affairs. Some of you may remember him, Joe Scanlon. He's since passed away, but he was the longtime Chief of Staff of Congressman St. Germain. That was in 1990. He asked me if I wanted to lobby, and I said, yeah, sure. I had been doing policy research and legislative research. So that was 32 years ago, and I've been lobbying ever since. So I worked for Blue Cross for 22 years. Had a number of different roles there, including policy work. But most of the time there, I was a lobbyist. And then along with my colleague, Scott Fraser, who give you his background. And I also was a backup spokesperson at Blue Cross as well. From there, I went to Westerly Hospital. I was the public information officer. I worked there for 3 years. In that role, I lobbied. I was the media spokesperson. I was an assistant to the CEO. And during the H1N1 crisis, swine flu, I was part of the team that included Block Island. Block Island was included in the South County region for coordination with the Department of Health on all activities H1N1. We had weekly calls with the Department of Health. In retrospect, I wish COVID was as quick as H1N1 and getting out of here, but it hasn't been. I left there in 2010, and that's when I started to work at Pannone Lopes Devereux O'Gara. As Alan said, we work with and for a gentleman named Matty Lopes, who can't be here today. Matty also, in addition to his government relations practice, also is a special master in a federal case. He oversees the delivery of mental health care to all prisoners in the state of California, which you can imagine is a time-consuming job. But we represent a number of clients. There's a client list in the packet that I'll give you, so you can take a look at who our other clients are. But again, I've been lobbying for 30 years. During when I started out at Blue Cross lobbying, we lobbied during the heyday of managed care. So, we learned to develop some tough skin. But I think through all that, even though Blue Cross wasn't always a popular client, we made and established good relationships with a lot of the reps and senators there. And that's what it's built on, credibility and trust. And we would bring that same credibility and trust and hard work, that work ethic to New Shoreham. So, turn it over to my colleague, Scott.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you for having us over. My name is Scott Fraser, and I am the rookie here at PLDO. I've been at the company, Brian reminded me, I think I just passed my probationary period. I started in October. So I passed my 90 days. I think I've made it. But I'm no rookie to lobbying up at the State House. Quick background. I started off in broadcasting for 5 or 6 years, was at an all news station in Providence. Then I went to the dark side and went to be a corporate spokesperson. But went to Blue Cross and Blue Shield and spent about 20 years there or more as the company spokesperson. And like Brian, our boss, Joe Scanlon, came to me one day and said, how'd you like to lobby up at the State House? Oh, sure. How hard can that be? I quickly found out. But spent 15 to 20 years lobbying at Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And again, Brian and I worked together and left Blue Cross, started my own business, my own public relations and lobbying business. And most recently, I spent 2.5 years as president and CEO of the Rhode Island Healthcare Association. We represented almost all of the nursing homes in the state of Rhode Island. So as you can imagine, the last 2.5 years were fairly busy from both the media and the government relations, the lobbying point of view. Over the summer, I was very fortunate to be picked up and approached by PLDO to come work for them under the strategy side. And I'm looking forward to not only continuing government relations, but as both Brian and Alan said, I'm bringing a public relations aspect to what we can offer clients. And not only just general public relations, but crisis communications is one of my specialties. So there's a lot that PLDO can offer, government, legal, and public relations. And happy to be here and happy to answer any questions when we get to that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alan?
This will be the team that will be fighting for New Shoreham up at the State House, working with our federal delegation, working with other government officials on your behalf if we're fortunate to be selected. But one of the things I want to get into next is talking about some of the issues that you're encountering here that we've seen, but also how we would work with you going forward if we're selected, because the process is critically important. You know, while we're on the so-called mainland, we are getting a lot of the updates just by following what's going on in the news, streaming through, you know, your council meetings. So, you know, we have the ability to be able to, you know, hear about some of the interactions that are going on with your residents. But what's critically important is listening to your voices, not only the councils, but also all of the town officials about some of the struggles and your needs. Right now, there are a lot, from what I can see, a lot of challenges, especially with funding. You know, I know that one of the sore points for New Shoreham with a lot of those federal funds that came down is you guys have the smallest amount out of any city in town in Rhode Island. You know, not only is there a fairness issue about that, and I'm very well versed in ARPA, you know, the American Rescue Plan Act, because one of my engagements is with the state pandemic recovery office to try to assist local cities providing legal advice for them on local and city and town issues and educational issues. So federal funding is critically important, making sure that New Shoreham has that opportunity to compete for different funds that can come down from programs that the state will be putting out that meets your needs, whether it's on housing. I know affordable housing, workforce type housing is always critical, because similar to Newport, and you know, my wife is from that area, we realize that everyone has this perception that Newport, you guys are wealthy, you've got $1 million homes, and you know, you don't need anything because everything's taken care of for you. But that's not reality. That's not reality, because that's also not what you see right now going on during the winter times, where it is the approximately 1,100 full-time residents that are here. The restaurants that aren't always open during time. You know, it's that finite period where you have a lot of individuals coming in during that tourist season, and that's what's also critically important. Those tourist hours need to be protected, and making sure it's supplemented with any additional funds that we may be able to get on your behalf, whether it's at the state level, federal level, or just working together to protect your issues that you have. But we're not here to say we have and know every single issue. And what's important is before the legislative session would start, and unfortunately it just started last week, but normally with our clients, we would sit with our clients, listen to them about what their priorities will be for the upcoming session, give them our forecast of where things will go, and you know, make sure that they know some of the hot issues that will have an impact locally, that we see coming, but also some of the ones going statewide and even nationally. And for instance, one of the things that we've advised our client that will have also an impact on you is the redistricting. Now, most likely, from what I'm seeing, you're going to have a new state senator that's going to be representing New Shoreham under all the maps that I've seen. It probably won't be Senator Sosnowski again. Representative Filippi, I think, will stay the same under all those maps. But this is the advice and guidance that we're trying to proactively provide to all of you as we would, get into the session. Once we have your priorities, working with you in conjunction to identify that, we would then defend on any bad pieces of legislation that have negative impact with you, testify on your behalf, provide you with constant updates about the legislative package that you guys are looking to put forward. But most importantly, getting the appropriate feedback from you as the client to shape legislation and push for any type of bills that we're doing on the proactive side as well. And that's on the legislative end. And that's one of the things that will guide throughout that legislative session. But what's also important from what I saw from the RFQ that many of you are also looking for is that assistance with even on the administration side, with different funding opportunities, going in, say, for instance, what's coming down now, we saw it in the Providence Journal today, is those additional tranches of federal dollars that are going to be going into Rhode Island housing, making sure that the residents here that are struggling have an opportunity to access it. And you can be that voice through the technology you provide, through even the Block Island Times or any other communications that you can put forward. And that's where Scott, can assist with that communication strategy. But we can also continue to tell you and set up meetings, what we like to call grass tops type meetings with different officials depending on your needs. On the administrative side, if you are going, say, you wanted to put together a project for affordable workforce housing where the town is working with the developer and you're looking to either access some funds, etc., we can help set up some of those meetings for you to help deliver some of those goals. That's the experience that we can provide on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. And our commitment to you is to continue to update you about our plan, our goals, and if plans change, it's our job to let you know where things are going and provide you a strategic timeline and also a realistic assessment of whether we're going to be able to achieve X, Y, or Z. But that's the job of not only just lobbyists, but the consulting aspect of what we can bring to the table. The federal delegation relationships that we have also run, fairly deep. In fact, Senator Whitehouse, I used to work for him at the Attorney General's office when he was our state's attorney, so I have a deep relationship with him. I've known Senator Reed because he's another Cranston native all my life. Went to school with Congressman Langevin, who is looks like from redistricting, staying as, within the 2nd Congressional District, as well as Maddie, Brian, Scott, having deep relationships with those federal delegations as well. I'm not going to sit here and say that we are federal lobbyists because we're not. I'll always be honest with you. What we do have is that deep relationship with the federal delegation here. And this is where, in my capacity as mayor, I've utilized those relationships to help draw in the funds, whether it's direct dollars that we were able to go after to say, fund police officers, fund firefighters, or even to get surplus equipment, through some of the different lanes in different federal departments. It's all because of those relationships, assigning someone within Cranston and hopefully here within the town, whoever that might be, to kind of search for, go after, and we can develop those relationships with these individuals to pursue these dollars or pursue the equipment or whatever needs that you might have. So that's how we envision that type of cross relationship amongst the state feds and obviously the relationships with other local government officials where there's a need and where you can work together. having that experience as the head of the League of Cities and Towns certainly does help. I have deep connections with, almost all of the mayors and town managers that are in Rhode Island and still stay attuned to it, where, as you saw, hopefully from my resume, I'm still working with the league to provide education opportunities about important issues such as ARPA. But I can assure you that there are a lot of issues that are on your plate. We're here to listen, here to advocate, and to do everything with integrity to ensure that you get what you deserve.
Thank you, Alan. Council, do you have any questions? Yes. Keith? Councilor Stover?
Could you walk us through what your process is when you take a new client?
I can answer that. We have some clients over the years who have hired us, like on one issue. For example, one of our clients right now wanted us to work with the DVR to help affect like some reciprocity legislation. That's probably at one end of the spectrum. On the others, for a client like New Shoreham, we would sit, assuming we were the winning bidder, we would sit with you to just see what your needs were, what goals you wanted to achieve. And then one of the things we do that Alan had mentioned was the legislative status reports. I remember hearing, I don't know, sometime in the past that Rhode Island per capita introduces the most legislation of any state. I don't know whether that's still true, but there are about 3,000 bills introduced every year, about 2,000 in the House, a little over 1,000 in the Senate. So one of the, we read all that legislation and we prepare a weekly report that we would share with all of you, or if there's a point person here, just to get your feedback and input on it. And then, if we needed to meet with sponsors or if you wanted to testify in any of those bills, we would certainly coordinate that as well. But I think the immediate thing we would do, Councilman, is just to, sit with all of you, or a point person, just to see what your needs are, what your goals are, your concerns, and then just take it from there.
And could you talk to us about any experiences you have with sort of the renewed earmarking process at the federal level? Renewed earmarking, for a decade or so, earmarking was forbidden. Now it's active again. What have you done on earmarking?
Like I was indicating before, we are not federal lobbyists, so we do not get involved in ourselves, the earmarking. What we would work on New Shoreham's behalf is working through our legislative delegation that's here for any type of dollars that we can, go after from the federal side.
Does your packet have a list of, I couldn't find a list of your existing farms?
We actually have it.
It's in there. It's in the back section, the very last insert on the left-hand side of the.
Yep. Yeah.
That's all.
Okay.
That's what you have with you today, right?
Yes. I apologize. The packet that I provided had the legal clients that we had provided representation to more recently. I totally spaced, and so we have the lobbying clients that are on that end too. So I apologize on that front.
Good.
I'm good for that.
Thanks, Keith. Sven?
Real quickly, thank you guys for coming again. And one of the things that I feel strongly about, and you may counsel and consult and tell me I'm crazy, is that it's one thing to talk about,
That's a new.
I'll talk about appropriations or dollars and how do we get our fair share, which if you look at what just happened 2 months ago, we got such a small share, it was almost embarrassing. And I had a little bit of a fit here, beyond insulting, right? So one is appropriations. The other is that it feels like to me that many times the chessboard is not designed for Block Island or even including Block Island. So there are regulations, there are definitions, there are metrics that Block Island just doesn't fit in. And, you know, whether you want to talk about attainable housing or affordable housing, suddenly because of like your discussion with Newport, the mean incomes here or median incomes box us out. Same kind of thing for a number of issues. Can you help me with experience that you guys have had as a firm where you've sort of gone in and helped change the metrics, shaped the formulas so that down the road we're included in the game versus just appropriations, because appropriations is about, you know, lobbying and muscle. This is a little bit more changing the board.
No, absolutely. And I can speak from that time that I was mayor because it presses upon a lot of the issues that I think you're trying to raise, because you're absolutely right. Seeing only basically $300,000 for, you know, your community is embarrassing when you think about it. But a lot of those metrics are set, whether it's for op or based, because they, on the federal side, utilize a lot of census data, income data in order to make those determinations, not just here, but nationally. Similarly, on the local side, I've experienced that on school funding. You know, everyone just thinks that Cranston, oh, you're such a large community, all you do is gain, which is not true. A lot of times it fluctuates based upon student population because of the educational funding formula. They take a look at all these factors, your student population, the trends, and they're constantly adjusting. I think Block Island just took a hit, just like many of the other communities across the state significantly, because while it's frustrating because everyone might hear a couple 100,000, oh, that's nothing. Well, it might be nothing to Cranston, but to Block Island, percentage-wise, that's a major component of your. So what I've done in that prior capacity is exactly what you had mentioned, Councilman. We have set up in that prior role meetings with the speaker, with the Senate President, with the finance chairs on both sides of the aisles, with also meeting RIDE to discuss their formulas and any tweaks that can be made so that Cranston, because at that time, while I understand the whole collective of every city and town, I was representing my client, and those were the residents of Cranston and students in Cranston. So we were able to effectively argue with them to, you know, take a look at different components to kind of raise it up. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't get every single dollar we asked for, but we were able to fight on different components to kind of counter what they're presenting as sometimes the, you know, this is it. It also happens to me in Cranston, and this is a fight every year. I was watching the budget with payment in lieu of taxes because we have the prison. That fight is so frustrating because every year it's a formula based. It's always how much they put in versus, but yet again, it's the same type of fight. I have to go every single year up to the speaker, up to the Senate President, the finance chairs to say, no, here's the services that we provide. You are not properly funding it. The state formula, a state statute says it's 20%, 27% of X. Here's where you're miscalculating, and just work through those. So those are some of the examples I can provide to you where you work different channels instead of just fighting the same arguments against the tide, but one individual representing, you know, that voice can make a difference versus sometimes the collective, because for New Shoreham, for Cranston, for any other individual communities, it's those key fights that you face sometimes that you need an extra voice.
Thank you.
Councilman, I'm not going to speak from experience as to what I've done, but listening to your question and Alan's response, what I would say is going forward is we would take your voice and bring it to the State House and remind people that this is not just a nice island to visit in the summer when, you know, the warm weather and you're going on vacation. These are folks that live here every day and need this funding. And what we can do collectively as a firm is bring your voice to the State House and to the people that need to hear it. And sometimes, as I'm sure you know, hearing a different voice say the same thing that you folks have been saying day in and day out may or may not get some attention, but at least we can do it on a regular basis with the folks at the State House, whether it's legislative or executive branch, and say, hey,
you can't just say 300,000 and think that's enough, because here's what our client and here's what you folks need, and bring them some examples. Again, we can't make any guarantees, but we can guarantee we will raise your voice and continue to make those points heard.
Just, if I may, just one example from my previous position at Westerly Hospital. You know, Westerly is a tourist community, I think in many ways, as Block Island is. You have a lot of influx of people in the summer, particularly from New York. But the board of directors and a lot of people in the community who were full-time residents of Westerly felt that their needs and concerns, the needs of the hospital weren't being heard in Providence. I personally didn't think that was the case. I think Westerly has a great delegation. But one of the things that I did when we got there was to help raise the profile of Westerly Hospital and its needs. Most hospitals in the state get what's called disproportionate share payments. You know, obviously the big ones are city hospitals like Rhode Island Hospital, Kent County, they're going to get more because they see more Medicaid patients. But one of the things we were able to do, you know, was say, hey, you know, Westerly Hospital isn't a system like here in New England or Lifespan. It's a community hospital. I mean, it's now part of Yale New Haven, but at the time, you know, South County Hospital, and I would go up to the State House with Lucci and Cola as well. And we would argue for more relief. And, you know, we also put in legislation that would help out community hospitals. By the year I left, we had gotten, you know, by raising our voices and meeting, as Alan had said, the House Finance, Senate Finance chairs and leadership, we were able to get more disproportionate share payments to Westerly. But I think the moral of the story is that, you know, as Scott said, we brought up a different voice and we explained our concerns. And I think overall it was helpful to the hospital.
And one more quick thing to that too. Bringing up your voice doesn't always mean going up to Smith Hill. One of the things that we've done for our clients too is bring Smith Hill to your backyards. And we just effectively did that recently for one of our clients who's looking to, you know, grab some, you know, state dollars to build a, you know, a health center. Now, I just got to be careful, you know, because our client list is there, but, you know, I'll just describe in general. What we ended up doing was bringing many of the General Assembly members, especially leadership, the finance team, out to our client, take a look at the existing facilities, walk them through, not only just seeing what is currently there to show, oh, wait a minute, this really needs either improvements or a new building, and basically show them that, you know, what the client is envisioning. And that's one of the things that we are hoping to be able to do with many of you too, outside of just, you know, necessarily your state senator and your rep who, you know, hopefully they're here. But outside of that, we want to make sure we get the leadership in Smith Hill. If there's big dynamic projects, big dollars that you're looking for particular, you know, areas, to show them, because sometimes having that lived experience where they're there, seeing firsthand, seeing what your vision is, it might not be done all in 1 year, but laying the groundwork so that they know what you're going through is a critical part of telling your story.
Marion, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I just, Alan, just to follow up on something, Carl, your firm is the legal advisor
Yes.
with the state, with the,
Pandemic.
forget the problem.
Yes,
Do you see that has any impact on what you were doing here in, Block Island?
No, it's
And what's the name of the company again?
Pandemic Recovery Office. Yes.
Pandemic Recovery Office for the state.
For the state, yeah, yes, correct. I'm legal counsel, outside legal counsel, providing legal advice to the Pandemic Recovery Office and their staff about city and town issues and educational issues that come up with, as some of you might know, OPPA just the Treasury just issued the final OPPA guidance. So I'm going all through that. So a lot of that role is providing advice to them. I don't see that as in conflict because I'm not sitting there, say when an application comes in and say, oh, yes, no, that's not my role. A lot of those dollars are coming into the individual, to the state, being distributed to different programs. And in a lot of the applications are going in, say, for instance, tourism dollars, that's being handled by Rhode Island Commerce. Housing, Rhode Island Housing is handling a lot of those affordable housing dollars that are coming into the state. So it's different departments. I don't envision a conflict with that representation that I have.
Okay, and the fact you represent this state.
I'm sorry?
You represent the outside council for this state.
Just for that office, just for that office. So for that one state agency, I'm not counsel for every single state department. So what normally happens with the legal engagement, and this is where it's a little bit different from a government relations standpoint. The legal engagement, say, I'm working for Pandemic Recovery Office. State Department of Transportation, if they have an issue, they would come to me. I'd have to go back to the firm, run a conflict check about that potential engagement, make sure it doesn't impact any of my other clients. And that's what would normally happen with each engagement. We'd have to take a look at it individually. So say, for instance, New Shoreham does become a client of ours, anything coming down the line, we'd have to do that similar type of look amongst all of our clients. So that make sure that there's no conflicts, amongst any of our clients, and we do that going forward continuously. Mark?
Yeah, let's stay on conflicts,
Sure.
Alan. I don't see any cities or towns listed on your client list. Are there any?
No, the only quasi-governmental agency that we have is University of Rhode Island Foundation. So we don't represent any, from a government relations perspective, any cities and towns. From a legal perspective, yes, I do have clients that I represent for projects, but I'm not their town solicitor or anything else. For instance, and this is public because I was in front of their council, East Providence had engaged me. I'm doing a lot of work for them on sewer infrastructure because a lot of my practice on the state municipal side is a lot of what I was doing as mayor. The infrastructure work, tax stabilization agreements, pensions. So that's the bulk of my practice, but nothing that I see right now that would interfere or conflict with the engagement from a lobbying perspective.
Let me throw a little curveball at you, somewhat of a challenge. Sven and Scott explained things very well when we were dealing with pushing for more money. And the argument we'd always get is you're so affluent out there, the median price and blah, blah, blah. What about when the argument comes up that we have such a small population? The example I'll give is if we want to pursue federal dollars for bike lanes on Block Island, and we tell them we have 20,000 people possibly out here on any given day in the summer. Their question always is, well, what's your year-round population?
Right.
And all of a sudden, any attempt you can get to get that money gets completely deflated. How would you, not consuming too much time, how would you address something like that?
That's where relationships matter. Taking that example about, say you're going after federal dollars on bike lanes, having those meetings with Senator Reed's office, since he's senior senator, Senator Whitehouse as well, and Congressman Langevin about your plans. There are federal dollars out there that can be utilized for creating bike lanes. Doesn't matter that it's 1,100 because those 1,100 residents here full-time deserve the same amount of dollars that Cranston, Providence, any other city and town residents do with the larger population, because where we would tell the story is exactly what you're talking about. On any given day, Block Island basically could have a football game worth of individuals coming onto this small space that you're dealing with. You need the infrastructure to handle and accommodate that, to also provide different means of travel for your residents. It's not just that one period of time, you tell the whole story. And part of telling that story would also be exactly what I had discussed, maybe bringing the senators in on one of these crazy days when you're getting off the ferry and all of a sudden everyone's crowding into that giant lane to try to get up, onto the island. Seeing what is going on helps tell the story. So it's an obstacle, but it's not one that can't be overcome, but especially through the weather.
Councilman, as you asked the question, I put my public relations hat on and I would say, if that question were posed to us, you're absolutely right. There's 15 to 20,000 in the summer. There's only 1,100 full-time people. However, when are you going to be using those bike lanes? You're going to be using them at the most of the year when you have most of the population here that just comes for the summer. So I think I would suggest someone that threw that as a negative to us, saying, no, what you really need to look at is the summer population, because that's the bulk of the time these bike lanes would be used. So you can't just go to 1,100. You have to look at the 15 to 20,000. I would continue to push that aspect of it. Yes, the bike lanes would be used the other 9 months of the year, but primarily it's going to be used during the summer when the bulk of the people are here. So I think I would, if again, someone were to throw that to me as a negative, I would politely try to turn it around and show them those facts.
Thank you, Chairman. And I also think this is a formula that's not, Mark, it's not across the board even, because I know the SBA does consider Block Island a economically disadvantaged area. That came up with constituents asking for help with EIDL loans and grants. So it's just not consistent with what, one organization has a different metric than the other. So I just wanted to add that because that's been kind of hard for people, before the end of the year to get through.
And you're absolutely correct, Councilman, because one of the most frustrating things that I learned about my time as mayor is the red tape is ridiculous, especially on the federal level. And when I ended up finding my first year in office, we had those devastating floods of 2010 where half of Cranston, half of Warwick was on the water. And I was shaking my head because we were just worried about response, cleanup, getting our residents safe and through. And then in the cleanup phase, after all the initial response is done, you had a federal agency dealing with what's in the water and another federal agency dealing with what's on the banks. And then when you're trying to coordinate like the whole project area, that could be a third federal agency. And sometimes they don't talk to each other.
Right.
And that's where a lot of our collective experience can really come in, because having those discussions, dialogues, that experience I've gone through can help, New Shore navigate through some of those challenges.
Exactly. It's like put in simple terms, it's the perception. Perception's a big problem, for the reasons that we've talked about here. And I think that's, the assistance, most of the assistance we're going to be looking for is to change that perception. Martha, do you have anything?
I'm still back on you get state aid. You get taxes in money in lieu of for the prison.
Right. Yes, for the prison and any educational institution and hospitals as well.
State, I guess state is what I'm focusing on.
Yes. No. It's all part of a state statute.
No,
where,
okay.
Yep.
Do we get, I think ours is all federal, isn't it?
Oh, taxes, it's paying a little taxes.
Right, but what we get is federal.
Yeah, what they usually do for is like if you have higher institutions in your community, in this case, it's a business, like hospitals and things of that nature. It's a formula driven that they come up with the funding.
I mean, we get it for the North End, for the wildlife refuge, but I don't think we get anything for the airport or.
No, we don't. Let me look into that. I want you to say that because we do have the airport here. I'm not sure
Yeah.
that's
See, I can't think of anything else. We used to have a lot more states.
Yeah.
That just struck me.
Right. And on the airport, I can say that is a challenge because, my colleague Scott Avedisian used to, tell me all the time, it's crazy. And he gets nothing from that.
The other thing, it's already slipping out of my head. Oh, way back, you were talking about, and this is something we've all talked about, in this list of money that every town was getting, we were so far down on the bottom. Nor, something has shifted, because we've always been at the bottom, but Little Compton has never been much ahead of us. And Little Compton was $1 million ahead of us. I
Right.
think. It was, wait a minute, it's not just, it used to be us in Little Compton.
Right.
And now it's only us, so I don't know what happened there, and I haven't looked at it.
And honestly, I haven't looked at that comparison with Little Compton either, so.
I've got
Okay.
I've got institutional memory back to the 80s, and it was always us in Little Compton,
Right.
and suddenly it's just us.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody made a mistake. Stranger things have happened.
Sorry, I can't answer that question because I just, I'm not aware of the, comparisons.
So, thanks. So looking at this client list, which is the one that was just in the packet that you were referring to before, first of all, it's very impressive. There are a lot of big firms here. And I'm sure it's about initiatives and there's some state-based and there's some more national-based. I'm looking at everything from the food trucks in .com to J&J to Amgen, et cetera. How do you balance out those resources? I'll assume that they're paying a fair amount more than we could. I assume that they have very different desires and plans than we do. You start dealing with some Fortune 100 companies to the smallest town in the smallest state.
And a lot of it, as Brian described earlier, is based on the client's needs and what they're looking for. In the package that you put out for the RFQ, and I know that I put in, a dollar amount for you guys based upon a comprehensive RFQ that you had asked for, because most clients are asking only for the legislative type services, the monitoring. So, and Brian can talk a little bit about like the scope of some of the work, but it varies depending on if you want us to monitor legislation and defend versus if there's proactive bills that you want us to pass. To some clients, we have continuously on retainer all throughout the year where we're providing, the service to them on different aspects of what they're, have engaged us for.
Before, or maybe you can, building on that, help me with, because you just brought it up, annual retainer, broader structures versus project / what I'm going to call task. So housing's a big issue, or whatever it may be. You pick it. Healthcare, I don't care. And let's go after that and really go after changing the formulas or changing dollars or trying to get more dollars on a certain feed. How do you guys work in that respect? The differences.
You mean if it's project specific versus?
Yeah.
Okay.
Versus general.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that that's simple a question to answer. A lot of our clients, as you mentioned, they're bigger clients. So obviously with the pharmaceutical industry, that's always an active industry. There's legislation. Amgen has a facility based here in West Greenwich. We track legislation for them. Legislation is always different in the 50 states regarding pharmaceutical issues. But Amgen also has, on the ground manufacturing issues here as well. Our retainer it's an annual, I guess I would describe it as all inclusive, which involves, day-to-day work at the State House, as well as any issues that may affect the West Greenwich plant and, state oversight of that. If Matty were here, he would say, we like to build a long-term relationship with our clients, not just a one-year deal. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, for example, has been, that was Matty's first client when he was with another law firm. So they've been with him for almost about 32 years now. They have issues, town-specific or site-specific issues, and they also have issues at the State House as well. So it's that kind of long-term relationship for any issue that may come up.
I don't know if this answers your question, Councilman.
get all three of us on an answer for your question, but I sense your question is, we've got some large clients, some national clients. We wouldn't be bidding on this contract. We wouldn't be here in front of you if we didn't feel we had the time to give to you folks, should you choose us to be representing you. Brian and I will be doing it full time from now until the end of the session. We have, Alan is with us, we have others, but we wouldn't waste your time with a pitch if we didn't think we could properly represent you, if that helps.
Because everybody wants to come to Block Island in January when it's 10 degrees.
But, and the other thing, Councilman, we don't provide more service to one client. We treat all of our, clients equally. And like Scott and Brian said, we're here because, we want to be your representative.
Thank you. Anybody? Council,
Thank you so much.
really?
Sure.
Martha, you're
My brain just wanders. The amount of legislation, is that it? What can we do we collectively, we as part of the state of Rhode Island, it always seems nonsensical. The amount of garbage that's flooding those sessions. How do we fix that? That's a philosophical question. That's not something for today, but.
And one quick thing, it's also a little bit of a inflated number too, as all of us have gone through. The total numbers a lot of times that are put out there, remember what happens usually at the General Assembly is there's the House introductions and the Senate also has a companion bill that usually mirrors, and they try to, track each other going for us as you're, moving a legislation too. So I think many times they count both of them as individual bills when technically they're one and the same on different sides of the chamber.
Which makes it really easy to track too, that's.
I know. It's a fundamental question because you're right, in some other states where they have full-time legislatures or different type of systems, there's no perfect answer. What I can say is it's a numbers question that you're asking, but that's part of the answer, explaining why the numbers.
It just feels like, every now and then you read something, it feels like there's a lot of dumb stuff that's left over from 40 years ago that never got cleaned up.
One woman's garbage is another woman's brilliant policy.
I will say, because you probably read about it, there are some laws on the books that go back to the 1800s. And I think the one that comes to mind is dueling. There are still laws relating to dueling on the books, which Rep. John Edwards has been trying to eliminate. There's another one about running your horse on highways and the horse can't go over 25 miles an hour or something like that.
We still on Block Island appoint every year a carter of fish,
That's a
a
state law.
quarter of wood. So
Yes,
there are some history,
that's it.
there are some historical elements that are okay. Dueling may be just fine.
That's someone's contract.
Just to let you know, we're nice enough to give our competitor a ride here because it was too cold. So hopefully you keep that in mind too.
No charge.
No charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for making the trip here. It was much appreciated.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, and I anticipate that we will stay on. Well, it's here. The meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please do. We are. Also have people for more.
Oh, yeah.
But what they do have, they have individual acts. If somebody wants to form a wedding outfit. And it's idiotic. I just think that's the stupidest thing.
Literally the general assembly does. This is marketing.
And it's just, it's simple places. I just, and I think that's the one I know about, how many others are like following the works of it.
You had a philosophical question for them. I remember so well 30 years ago when I was at my council, it seemed that they had Senator Reed, Senator Pell and Chasey's phone number on their speed dial, and they could always call
Well, 20 years ago, we were up there. Individuals went up. They did it, and
They were right there for helping us out.
I don't like it.
They were right there for helping. There were no discharge. They were all.
I got that, when I got in council, I said to them, we're a broadcasting.
They know. No.
Well, it's kind of shaky up there, ties. with Block Island.
Yeah.
They were excellent and.
Yes, I know. Yes.
OCD.
Oh, thank you very much, Mark. Oh, I saw that.
Oh, did you fix that? Thank you.
That was.
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
Thanks, how are you?
That whole conversation with Joe. That guy's. The film was. If the stand is 40,000 square feet, you have to have 40,000 square feet.
Yep.
We should be saying.
Lead contract include maybe a couple of extras.
I'll see what I can do.
Actually, you get the portable one, so you can leave.
Mike, did you rather do that by standing or I should?
Okay, that's fine.
Sure.
No problem. I'm on the first one. Thank you as well. I did.
I came over with my arch enemy says I'm going to do them a minute ago. Just kidding.
Sure you don't want to just lower that so you can sit?
Whatever's easier, it doesn't really matter.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. This is fine. Yeah. Great. Hello, everybody.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks sorry, microphones. Thank you so much for coming,
Sure.
making the trip
It's great
on
to
the
be here.
ferry nonetheless.
It was beautiful this morning. I tell you, it was a very, very smooth ride over. It was really very pleasant. 10. So that points you to 10. Yeah. So it was very nice stuff. Great to be here. It's much better to do these in person, in my opinion, than to do it via Zoom and the rest of it. So, but it's good to be here.
And, you know, as you probably can imagine, it's really important to us that people who want to represent us actually make the effort.
That's very, very true, particularly as you noted, the challenges that the town faces already. Part of it is isolation. So part of it, at least I think you do, if people want to consult for you, should be engaged and should be willing to come and visit and talk to you in person. So absolutely glad to be here.
Well, we started all this with, we just basically asked, we start off by saying, thank you for responding to our RFQ. And basically just start off by letting us know what you think you can accomplish for the town.
Sure. Well, thank you very much for including me in the RFQ for starters. As I was talking to the guys before and, Rick McCall, Rhode Island's such a small place. We all know each other. And, those two groups happen to be really close friends. So it's kind of it's different, but it's Rhode Island. That's the way it works. So we've competed against each other. And quite honestly, from my perspective, if you ended up with either one of them in as opposed to me, you'd be in good hands. So both really good firms. So Advocacy Solution is the name of my company, obviously based in Providence. I've been doing this for quite a while. Based on the gray hair, you probably can tell that. So I started out kind of in government during my college days. I worked for the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, which I referenced in my proposal. It was the time when the trust was created. So if I'm sure you're familiar with the interlocal trust, those are the years that I was back at the league in those days. So from there, worked in the state senate, then worked for Governor Sunland for a couple of years, and then went off and practiced law at Adel Pollock and Sheehan for a couple of years, and then essentially started my government relations and lobbying firm in 1995. Did that with a partner up until 2005, and then essentially started out on my own in 2005. So everything I've been doing since then, it's been government relations, communications, and we've done a lot of different work for a lot of different types of industries. We've done a lot of work for municipalities and other governmental entities. We do both government relations and communications. Communications is probably PR, crisis communications are the two biggest things that you would see on that side. So my proposal, or my qualifications pretty much lay that out. I know you were looking for a pretty expanded list on that, and I think I got everybody that we did work for currently. So I've been at this government relations and lobbying thing since I left the governor's office, essentially practiced law, but this was always part of my business. I think of government relations as a little bit different than a lot of the other typical kind of lobbyists. And, we try to provide clients and we try to provide legislators with, I like to characterize as staff assistants. So we try to really understand the issues that are facing you all and the town in this case. And we also try to educate members of the legislature, the executive branch, about those issues. Oftentimes, as you probably know, or as you do know, I'm sure, the legislature's got very, very little staff. There's not very much staff that they can work from or rely on. So they really rely on lobbyists to help them out a great deal. And we've tried to, carve out that niche and carve out that level of expertise on a policy perspective so that we're able to articulate to members of the legislature exactly what's going on. So as you probably also know, Rhode Island's a very top-down legislature. Our leadership is very, very powerful. Our rank and file, tends to be more of a court of appeals than anything other than that. But we make sure that we pay attention to everybody from the speaker's office right on down to the newest member, because as time is turned out, those people eventually become the leadership and so forth. But it's also important for rank and file legislators, I believe, to really have a good understanding of what's going on, because there's so much flying at them and it comes so fast. It's really hard for people to really understand what's going on. You've got all these political craziness, right wing, left wing, progressives, not progressives. We try to stay out of all of that. We try to make sure that we can advocate for clients in a I don't want to say nonpartisan, because that's probably not the right word, but I'll go back to my more policy focused. We try to provide legislators with both sides of the argument. We try to make them understand that they don't, what both sides are, so that they're not getting sandbagged and they're not getting hurt by people who are coming and saying, hey, McMahon didn't tell me that, 25 people were going to come and yell at me about this particular bill. We try not to do that. So we've been at it, my firm's 7 people, including myself. I'm sorry, 6 people, including myself. We have a new gentleman starting with us on Monday, the 17th. His name is Grant Pilkington. He is the current Deputy Chief of Staff to the Speaker of the House. He's coming over to join us on Monday. So personal relationships, it is, like I said at the beginning, this is Rhode Island, so everyone talks about their personal relationships. Executive branch, I've known Dan McKee since he was the mayor of Cumberland. I've worked on his transition team. I've worked with him throughout his administration, trying to help him move through the myriad of issues. I'm working very closely right now on COVID testing, test kits. I represent Becton Dickinson, who manufactures one of the more prominent test kits. And we're trying to work hard to get Rhode Island to be on the front of that line in terms of getting those test kits here. And we've also worked with a company called Vault, trying to get them to be more active and engaged in the testing program, because the testing situation really has been a little bumpy, as you probably have seen in your own experiences, but it's really bumpy in some of the urban communities, on the mainland. So it's been a lot of fun. So I've got a great relationship with him and his team, Tony Afonso and Kim Ahern and others. And, the governors and the legislature, it's only, as I mentioned, Rhode Island 3 times now. Mike McCaffrey and I grew up together, who's the Senate Majority Leader. Michael we went to the same high school, we went to the same college, we went to the same law school. We played them. Well, yeah, pretty much, right? So we're LaSalle guys, myself and McCaffrey. So we're all LaSalle, Henrican guys. So we went to Henrican, but Mike McCaffrey, from age 8 to 12, Mike McCaffrey played next to me. He was my defense partner in ice hockey from 8 years old to 12 years old. So known Mike a very, very long time. And the speaker has the very, he likes to tell this story, but he introduced me to my wife. So Joe always looks at me and then says, I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing after 32 years, but it is a good thing. But that's just kind of how Rhode Island is. Rhode Island's that kind of place. So we've been working hard to build a good business. We've been working hard to build a good reputation. And I think we enjoy all of those things. So that's kind of my intro. Be happy to answer any specific questions or anything else that you may have.
I just like to answer Keith, no, not everybody went to high school together. Don't ever ask a Tom and Tiger about St. Ray's.
That's right. Everybody's got a rivalry. Everyone's got
Not that, well, McCoy's gone, so that's, I don't know what's going on over there now, and the high schools are gonna be switching around, I would imagine, and
very
I would.
true.
Rhode Island should have a law school. Because now you don't even have to leave the state.
Right.
Yeah, it's very true.
Counselors,
It used to be, LaSalle had been PC, Suffolk Law.
It's me.
Which one?
I went to Henrican, went to PC, went to Suffolk Law. So.
And I'm from Block Island. I've never lived anywhere else, and I knew that.
See that? That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool that you would know that all along. I think it's pretty cool that she knows that. It's pretty cool.
Mark, did you have any questions for the applicant?
Why'd you go to Suffolk?
Or any counsel?
I'll start where Mark was thinking, and I agree with you. Rhode Island's a big town as opposed to a small state. And with that in mind, a lot of clients on your menu are municipalities and towns.
Mhm.
Do you foresee a conflict with all going for similar
I
money?
don't. We don't do any lobbying for anyone other than, we've done work for Providence in the past and Pawtucket. We've got communications relationships with just about everybody that I mentioned in there. I don't foresee any conflicts, but until you get into the mix, it's hard to really, perceive or identify. I don't think you are trying to secede from the state or you're at war with any community, but you never know in this crazy place. Central Falls and Pawtucket can't get along with each other half the time. So I don't foresee any, but let me tell you a little bit about conflicts and how we deal with them. So we take conflicts very, very seriously, both real and potential. So, and I was interested that you paid so much attention to it in your RFI, because very few people do. So it's a compliment to whoever drafted that RFI. So conflicts, we treat them like a legal conflict, like a lawyer would, right? So we basically, first and foremost, if a conflict presents itself to us, either with another client or a particular issue, we certainly would come back to you first as the client and talk to you about it and say, hey, we think we might have an issue here. There are any number of ways around conflicts, but the easiest way is to either step out on that particular issue and then work from that or not. So I don't foresee any. We typically don't have a lot of conflicts during the course of a year, and you've seen our client list. We typically don't have any. Conflicts are so rare that it's really kind of a situation that we often. Now, I'm a little bit more sensitive to it, and I will say this in my closing, but I'll say it now. We pay attention to the rules. We file lobbyist reports on time. We, as crazy as they are and as hard as they are to file, we don't violate the campaign finance rules. We report our contributions, things of that sort. So we take this stuff seriously because it's really where you get yourself in a jam with your client and potential clients down the road. You don't want to be in a conflict situation. So that's kind of how we deal with them. And obviously, if something came up you saw, you'd come to me, and then that would probably be the first time I heard it, or vice versa. If I see something that's going on in the State House that you may be at odds with somebody over, I don't know, a particular issue. But from what I can tell right now, I don't think it's going to be an issue, but we're very, very cognizant of it.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something. I think different ones of us have a different concern about conflict. And mine was more analogous to when we hire an attorney. It's, you don't have any other clients on Block Island.
Right. I do not have any other
And
clients on Block Island. Yeah.
that's more what I'm concerned with, because I don't want information or direction or influence coming from anywhere other than the town council and the town that's paying the lobbyist, or whatever the term is. That was my concern about conflict.
Understood. And I agree with you 100%. We don't currently represent anybody on Block Island or doing business on Block Island. So I think we're over that hump. But I agree with you, because our duty is to you, not to anybody else. You're the one who's paying the bill. So I look at it as it is a duty. It's a duty to serve you and to make sure conflicts are dealt with, confidentiality is adhered to. I'm sure there will be conversations that we'll have, and it's such an important piece to what we do. The reason why we've gotten as far as we have in this state that is so small is that we do a good job. We respect conflicts and we respect confidentiality. So, and that's a two-way street. Confidentiality is a two-way street. And oftentimes people forget on your side of the table, oh, wait a minute. Frank McMahon said X, and then next thing you know, that's on the street. That's something that we've got to pay attention to all the time, because as you know, in this crazy place, rumors and things of that sort get out pretty quickly, and who knows what people are saying about what. But yeah, we respect that stuff. We respect that point of view, and respect confidentiality and the conflict process very, very seriously.
We also have and I say this as someone who's always lived here, a really, I feel, increasingly difficult problem there are groups who represent themselves as representing Block Island.
Sure.
And come November, we'll be back in April. And they own property here, they pay taxes here, but they have no idea what's going on here.
I understand that.
It's extraordinarily frustrating, because then you'll get a phone call from somebody who heard from somebody in Florida, who heard from somebody in Arizona. And it's like, just stop it. Yeah.
No, I can appreciate that. I'm sure you hear from a lot from New Yorkers too, but that's I can appreciate that. It is an issue.
Federal stuff, right?
Yeah, so I was going to touch on that. So we've done a lot so far with ARPA and a variety of different programs. And it's interesting because we have a little bit of visibility into the treasury side of it because we work for Rhode Island Housing and we're doing work with them on the rent relief program as well as the housing assistance program they just announced yesterday. So that's been a very interesting process to see the difference between what the politicians will tell you the program is and then what actually the Treasury Department says the rules and regulations are. So that's been interesting. On the client side, we've worked with the Coalition of Children and Families. And if you remember on the first day of the legislative session, the first 100 million or so, the governor submitted a couple bills and the legislature passed it. There was a piece in there of 12.5 million for those particular agencies. So they're essentially the agencies that do DCYF's work day in and day out. So they're having an incredible workforce problem. So we were able to convince the governor in the congressional delegation that 12.5 of that should end up in those particular agencies. So we've worked hard to again, first and foremost, understand what the buckets of money are, what are coming down, what the timeframes are, what the rules are. And then we've been advocating for our clients' interest in that particular, getting a piece of that quote unquote pie. So it's been a very, very tumultuous time period. I'll be honest with you. It's been very different to listen to the political folks kind of talk about the programs and then actually see the way Treasury wants them implemented. And that's been to us, that's been the steepest learning curve. Because, you hear so-and-so saying, well, you can do this money for this, that, and why. And next thing you know, you're going through the process and there's all kinds of different parameters and things. So we've been able to help navigate a few people through that. And we've got a few more that we're currently working with to kind of get through that process. But the governor's office now has a pretty streamlined approach. The legislature has a pretty streamlined approach now too, as well. The politics of ARPA funds are going to be very, very interesting as time goes on. The legislatures can have much more of a role in the disbursement and the prioritization and then the disbursement of these dollars. There's one little interesting fact that the state doesn't even have a capability to cut checks yet for a lot of these different programs. So the state's working hard to get some of that back office stuff built to be able to do some of that. But so it's been a pretty arduous process. And on the one hand, the political folks love to say, we've got all this money. Then the bureaucrats have to try to figure out how to get it on the street. And, there is a little bit of a disconnect between the two, but it's getting better. It's really getting better. So outside of the ARPA environment, yeah. So our experience there is we're lucky with Senator Reid and Senator Whitehouse and the two members of Congress that we have. So we've been successful with all four offices in dealing with different types of programs, really primarily in the big four appropriations bills. That's really where we've spent the most of our time, where most of our clients have been either healthcare or education or something along those lines. So those are the four big appropriation bills: that transportation, health and human services, et cetera, education. Those are the bills that we've been the most engaged in, but we're lucky. We've got a very, very talented and a very senior in terms of seniority, in terms of the United States Senate in Reid. White House has got a lot of respect as well. And then Langevin and Cicilline both have their own strengths in the House side as well. So we've interacted a lot with their offices. In fact, Jim Langevin is another high school classmate of mine. He was a year behind me in his accident, and so we've known Jim. I've known Jimmy since he was a kid. So that's how we do it. And we don't really, it's trying to think about how to kind of characterize it. I wouldn't say it's really something that's very, it's very technical in nature. It's, in working with your planner or your DPW director or people like that, clean water projects, things of that sort. Those kinds of things are a lot easier than some of the health and human service things, which you might find. But I think the appropriation process is really kind of standing pat, taking a second seat now to all this ARPA dollars that are on the street for these projects that everyone really wants to do. So I think it's going to be a little while before you get back to that particular conversation within the context of the congressional appropriation bills.
Could you just walk us through who Rhode Island Housing is? And what to do for them?
Sure. So Rhode Island Housing is the state's housing finance agency. They essentially are responsible for financing the affordable housing components of the state's comprehensive housing master plan, I believe is what it's called. So they are a quasi-public agency. The chair of the board was Nick Ratsinas. Nick just resigned, and I think Jim Thorson, who's the director of administration, he's going to be the interim chairman. So it's a public board appointed by the governor, by the Senate president, the Senate, and the House Speaker. And they're responsible for implementing homeowner assistance, low interest loans, low interest mortgage loans, things of that sort.
You work on legislation.
Bless you. So we do two things for them. We provide them with government relations strategy. We don't lobby for them per se. And we also help them with communications. Particularly in light of rent relief and housing assistance are two big things that we've been working with them of late. Christine Hunsinger is the person that I deal with directly. Carol Ventura is the executive director.
Let's stay on housing and
Sure.
go from what Keith is. Block Island is perceived as affluent, maybe even self-sustaining because
Sure.
the starter home is just south of $1 million, median price, $1.50.
Mhm.
How do we change the perspective up there to let them know we have a crisis out here when it comes to affordable housing?
So it's interesting because.
And one other thing on that
Sure.
menu, we've addressed, as per state guidelines, the 10% affordable housing that almost, I mean, so many of the other communities haven't. So that's another
Well,
great problem
story.
we have.
Right, because I live in a community that basically said to the state, you know, we don't care about your rules, just keep fining us or whatever the right word is. So I live in the town of Barrington where, you know, the affordable housing issue takes on tones of all kinds of political crazy fights and everything else. And it depends on, you know, what town council comes in, their particular view of it. We had a affordable housing development put in, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7, or 8 years ago. And, you know, the people in the particular neighborhood went berserk. And then as it turned out, it's turned out to be a really lovely development and it's been really great. So I think that's an interesting dilemma that the town of North Shoreham has, in that you've done what you need to do, but you certainly you're constrained by the size of your island. You're going to be in a different, you should be considered differently than the town of Barrington or the town of East Greenwich. You just don't have the housing stock or the resources of land to be able to do what the state's affordable housing plan contemplated. So I think that there needs to be some education. The Speaker of the House, Joe Sakachi, he's very interested in affordable housing. He's a guy that I think really for the first time, the legislative leadership has really embraced housing as an issue, and he's really devoted to it. So I think he's a person to start with. I think he certainly would be a person to talk to say, hey, this is our dilemma. You know, we want to be, we've done everything we need to do, but we just have a certain constraints. There probably needs to be some recognition of that by not only the elected officials, but some of the bureaucratic folks too, in the statewide planning office and the affordable side of things. So those are complete separate things. Back to your question, Rhode Island Housing doesn't do that stuff. That's all state Department of Administration. Housing is in that side of it. The policy side is done on that side. Rhode Island Housing is merely a bank. That's what they essentially do. Not unlike the infrastructure bank, which you may be familiar with too, if you've done any clean water or sewer projects with. Same exact process. Does that answer your question?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
So Frank, you said yesterday that they made some changes to the housing, the monies that were coming in, and I know they finally hired a housing czar. I mean, did that happen already?
So they're in the process of that. They just funded it in the most recent budget that passed, so they haven't hired anybody as of yet. Again, that'll be a state employee, I think somewhere within the Department of Rhode Island Commerce Corporation, so somewhere in that world. Yeah, yesterday's program was a mortgage assistance for people who hit a certain income level and you own your own home and you've been impacted by COVID. You can get up to $50,000 as a grant to be able to pay your mortgage back or pay, some people there's tons of people unfortunately in foreclosure, different phases of foreclosure. It's going to stave off some of that.
Okay, yes, thanks. I did know about that. I think you had to have a house that wasn't more than $550,000
Right,
or something
exactly.
like that. So, I know.
That's a
exactly.
shed.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Exactly. So
Hypothetical.
Yep.
We say to you, we need housing dollars outside of this 10%. Outside of the 10% that we've already reached.
Mhm.
For workforce housing. Now that we have a huge issue with tradespeople. We don't have any left. A lot of them are retired. We have some, but there's, it's just not enough to go around, especially with the spring coming up with the busy season, the construction and the people getting ready for their rentals and their own, to stay in their own houses for the summer. So I guess it's workforce housing. Would that be something we could look for outside of the 10%?
Yes. So in my mind, workforce housing, I think a couple things, and again, whether you hire me or not, take a look and see what East Hampton's doing out there in Long Island, Montauk, Amagansett, and East Hampton. See what they've got a proposal that they're pushing for workforce housing. Charleston, South Carolina is another community that has a workforce housing. These are kind of the 2 or 3 best practices that are out there. So I think that if you were to hire me, the first thing I would do is just do just that. Take a look around and see what everybody else is doing in terms of what's great ideas. There are different ways to accomplish that. I think that based on what I've read, the ARPA dollars and the different subsets of those, ERISA and all the rest of them, it's not ERISA in the retirement sense, there's a whole bunch of acronyms. There are dollars that allow some flexibility and allow for a story to be told to be able to get dollars in. And that's a process that the governor, the speaker, and the Senate president are kind of coordinating at the moment. But that is certainly something you should do, and you should do it quickly, because just by way of calendar for you, the governor is going to propose his fiscal 23 budget on January 20th. So that's going to be the first piece of the bucket. I think that the broader discussion relative to those dollars, the federal dollars that are out there, will take well into June. But I think that they want to be able to have most of what is spendable for this calendar year to be obligated. And I'm sure you all know the difference between obligated and spent and all that jazz, right? So they have to have some of this money obligated, or else it gets clawed back to the federal government. So I would suggest that that's something that you should do really quickly, if that's something you're really interested in. And I think that there are opportunities. I think you need to dig in. I need to dig in a little bit more to give you a specific lane to follow. But I think there's certainly something to be able to talk to and talk about.
Thank you. Anybody?
One of the things, and you touched on it a couple of times, one is getting allocations, appropriations, hey, there's X dollars out there, how do we make sure it's fair share? The other is, and it's been touched on a few times, because of our median incomes, house values,
Sure.
And there's a number of metrics, we're often not even in the game, or at least we're on the outside of the chessboard.
Right.
Have you had or can you provide any examples where you sort of helped shape the metrics, you've helped shape the chessboard so that actually we're in the game? And you see this often with Block Island, where we suddenly are at the bottom of the list, we're hardly even above the cellar.
Yeah. Not specifically on point in terms of the topic, but I think that in the case of Verizon, and specifically Verizon Wireless, we've had numerous issues with them relating to tax issues.
We've had numerous issues.
With Verizon.
So
With Verizon.
I heard, when I first got here, I was actually on a conference call, and I said, oh, by the way, your central office is right across the street from town hall. And anyway, it was pretty funny, but they said, oh, yeah. So anyway, Verizon.
Could you find something?
You got somebody then. Yeah. So I think, Verizon's a good example where they, they're not unlike you, right? So everyone thinks Verizon's this big, massive, money-making operation. And yet, they're the, I don't know, third or fourth or fifth highest taxpayer in the state in terms of real estate taxes and municipalities. So, we've had conversations about planned obsolescence and different kinds of really goofy technical things about tax policy with different tax assessors, and it's been kind of an interesting experience. And we haven't got to the point where the legislation is passed yet, but we've forwarded the issue so far that now we have the League of Cities and Towns and others that are actually kind of understanding the issue for the very first time. And it's not necessarily a business issue. It's not going to necessarily result in less money for the town in the particular city or town that we're talking to. So I think that's an example of one where we started with the grassroots folks in the cities and towns, and we've kind of moved forward. DraftKings is probably another one. DraftKings came into Rhode Island in anticipation of sports betting, mobile sports betting in particular. And the Rhode Island Lottery has the most arcane and hugest corporate welfare one-sided contract with IGT that you can't even imagine. What you think you know about it, multiply it by 1,000, and then you'll know what it's about. In the case of DraftKings, what we did was DraftKings has an unbelievably much better product than what you see now. If you were to download Rhode Island Sports Bet, it looks like someone designed it in their garage, to be honest with you. It's not a very sophisticated or appealing mobile app. So make a long story short, we were very engaged during the whole IGT and Bally's conversation last General Assembly session to make sure that people understood that there needs to be flexibility so that the lottery can issue RFPs to have the more modern DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars, MGM. You see them all advertised whenever you're watching TV. Rhode Island, we can't even operate. We can't even, so within that new legislation though, that it's reflected in there that the lottery will be able to issue an RFP to be able to allow DraftKings and FanDuel and other come in and compete. Not just come in and just say, hey, we're here and we'll take all your customers. It's about competing. So those are two kind of examples where you don't get a lot of press on those kinds of things, but those are two examples of where our approach and our lobbying and our advocacy efforts were geared, and the result was what the company or the entity wanted. So those might be two examples.
Thank you.
I don't know whether you're didn't agree about why we're in the midst of one of the largest public works projects in the island's history with broadband.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that? Town almost unanimously passed an $8 million bond. It's extraordinary to think about it, to wire ourselves. And all we hear is talk about broadband, particularly coming out of the federal government. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about our ability or what the strategy might be to recoup some of our money.
So the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation is in the process of doing some work relative to broadband. And I know Cox is at the table, Verizon's at the table. I don't know if the League of Cities and Towns or anyone else representing municipalities is at that table. There are some dollars, which I think the way I hear it, the way I'm hearing things, it sounds more like they're looking to do more allocation to individual families, particularly low-income families, so they have some sort of a voucher or something along those lines. But there has been conversation about expansion of broadband and then recouping some of those costs. So I would suggest, and I can get it back to you through the town manager, the young woman's name who runs the commission, I can't think of her name. But I could get you her email address at Commerce Corporation. Daniela Fairchild, I believe is her name. She's a person to kind of get in touch with. Again, if you don't, hire me, whoever you do with, you need to get in front of her to figure out what exactly the opportunities are going to be for cities and towns as you move forward in these particular issues. But I do think there is some appetite to help with expansion. And I think you need to tell your story.
First, we're not even expanding.
We're installing.
Well, so that's even better, right? I mean, so you're just getting started
I
more or
would think
less
so.
in that kind of context. So
Well, I
yeah,
think-
that's one that you should jump on quickly too, because those wheels are turning.
We're being the trucks are taking the wires around, as we speak.
And you hired a private vendor to do that? Mhm. Good.
But it feels like, when these things come up, it always feels like, we've already committed it. Therefore,
Yeah,
we don't qualify.
Right.
That's not
you're one step ahead of
fair
where you need to
because
be.
we always figure we're gonna be left out anyway, so,
Mhm. Yeah.
But I'm gonna go back to the, reconfiguring the chessboard. I don't think that's the solution, only because I've dealt with this for so long. There has to be some other, we're not gonna restructure the formulas that the state uses for, I've been through reform, I've been through, God, I go back to the Omnibus Tax Relief and Replacement Act, which didn't work in the 80s.
Mhm.
And I think we have to have a different approach than that. There has to be some different way, different lens through which Block Island is viewed. I don't think we're going to be able to change a whole system
Mm.
and make us, because we're not gonna come out ahead any way you cut it
Right.
with our property values and
Mhm.
we used to be in a little better position than that, but these last few years,
Sure.
Things have
Property
gone up
values
the
are
charts out
skyrocketing,
here.
sure. That's an interesting, it's come up a couple times now. It's interesting that it's obviously something that's on your mind, but changing that perception or changing the lens that elected officials in the state house and the congressional delegation look at you, that's probably a really important component of what you've got to do. And that's, communication and advocacy, and that's a little bit of work on your part to make sure that whoever your advocate is, he or she is actually understanding what's really going on. I do strongly suggest that if you could have your, one of your staff folks take a look around at some of your communities, other, coastal islands and things of that sort. I don't know what Georgia and the other North Carolina, those places down there, there's all different places and things, but there's lots happening. And, again, I don't think you need to reinvent the wheel. I think you do need to reinvent the way people look at you. And I think that's a communications challenge on top of an advocacy challenge that you have. It's interesting because everything I hear, whoever drafted this RFI, I congratulate them. They did a good job because they really captured what the issues are that you are facing. And I think your geographic isolation that's another reason why you reviewed the way you reviewed, and you're kind of out of sight and out of mind. I think that's something that you would rectify quickly with having someone, of any one of the three, if the caliber of the three firms that you're talking to. I think that all three of them would have the horsepower to do the things that you need to do.
The out of sight, out of mind, there are a number of situations where either dollars have been allocated or rules have been written, and I'm going to use the CRMC as a good example.
Yep.
They looked at every single town except one.
Yours. Yeah.
How could the CRM, so even those that you think would be, they just ran out of money. They said, well, we can,
Yeah.
we're too far down in the map.
Yeah.
I mean, there were times
It's the
when
page break.
there were times we weren't even on the weather map.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember it was a big deal. Channel 6 finally put us on the weather map.
Right.
It was probably 30 years ago, but it's
Yeah.
just like the
Yeah.
Cape and the Islands, Southern Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And wait a minute, we're not the Cape and the Islands.
Yeah.
We're not coastal Rhode
You're
Island.
not Montauk.
Who the hell are we?
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah. I
Just,
understand.
just last week, we had Channel 10 say that we had a coating of snow on the ground, and they looked at the weather camera on Block Island, there was a coat of snow on the ground, and we're all looking at the ground saying a flake hasn't even flown out here. So we assumed they were looking at
That's great.
beach sand out at the North Light, because there is a camera there, and they thought the beach sand might have been the snow.
There you go.
So it's not just the government, it's, you know, we're obviously a tourist destination for the summer.
Right.
And I think our feeling is that the rest of the year,
Yeah.
we're just those people out
Right.
there, those
Yeah,
crazy
Newport-
people on Block
But we're
Island.
not- we're
Newport
not-
feels a little like you too. Newport feels,
Oh, Newport, oh, stop even talking
Yeah.
about, don't talk to us about Newport.
they feel a little bit like you though.
Oh, so,
Because they want
yeah.
Mary Ann Crawford, do you have any questions? Can you think of one?
Newport.
No, you're not Newport.
Newport
But
also.
Newport City Council thinks a lot like you do in terms of the way they are treated about, because they have a huge tourist issue in the summertime. A lot of the alcohol issues and the different way alcohol licenses and, those kinds of things are dealt with are very, very different in Newport than they are in, say, East Greenwich or Warwick or wherever the case may be. So I think everybody thinks that they're different, but I think it's really more about communicating what you are and making sure that you are communicating what you are consistently. And then I think people start to get the hang of it.
There's not a level of government that feels like it's being treated well by the level above it.
True.
Our issue really, to me, in simple terms, is being a bit of a square peg.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Fair.
we don't, as Martha was saying, you have this very formula driven system. So, oh, your median income is high, you can't qualify.
Right.
Well, our median income is high because it's incredibly expensive to live here.
Right.
Our median income is high because our median home value is over $1 million. So
What
you have,
happens to the
you have
median
people who
income?
grow up and work here who literally, unless they have someone who's gonna give them a deep discount on land or give them a house, will never be able to buy a house here.
Right.
Except through an an attainable housing program. So it's that's the challenge to me is, can you explain that to people and via your explanation, get people to understand that we have out here the same thing that they have in Providence with
Right.
families who are working 3 jobs to try to keep a roof over their head.
Right.
It's remarkably similar.
So I think the answer to your question, then I have a question of my own. I think the answer to your question is yes. I think it really comes in the form of a communication strategy and an advocacy strategy that need to be consistent and thought about together. And then done, then it needs to be done. And I think that that's always where the rubber hits the road. That's always where things get tricky. It's going to take a little while because, your problems haven't just started in the last 2 years. It's probably been a problem, since 1664 or whatever it was when the town was chartered. So it's probably been the same kind of thing. So let me ask you a question though. Do you know the different median income between summer population or seasonal versus non-seasonal?
Are you talking about the people who,
Yeah.
no, finish.
Okay.
Are you talking about the people who come here in the summer?
Right. So
You're not talking about the summer houses that have zip codes in Fairfield and Westchester,
so-
and Essex. and-
So I guess my question is this, I'm not sure what I'm asking, so let me rephrase it. Do you know what your winter population median income is versus your seasonal, when your seasonal visitors and other people who live, own property here, when they get here? Can you separate those
Still don't
two?
understand the question.
We know what the median is for people who report their income here.
Okay,
In
good.
other words,
As residents.
as residents.
Okay,
And that is, if I recall correctly, $66,000,
okay,
which is, if you just sort of went to the Providence City Council and said, we're really struggling, our median family income is $66,000, they'd probably swing a hammer at your head.
Right, because their median income is probably 38.
Poor you.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
But to build on it, you mentioned about, Andre mentioned 3 jobs. There are a lot of people on Block Island, we call it the Block Island Shuffle, where, you don't have year-round housing. So since they're gonna rent out their house in the summer, you've got to move, maybe it's living in a boat for a few, whatever the solution may be. Not only are you working multiple jobs, but you're also now having to deal with your housing. And to Keith's point, the median income, we got a handle on that, and that's where we're not in the board, right? We've got to figure that out.
That's where you are.
And I agree with you on communication. I just figured there's a number of metrics that at a face value, you get it when you're dealing with the state or you're looking at Providence and Cranston and Barrington and all that. But suddenly when it becomes to Block Island, we don't have ferries, so we can't go back and forth to work. So we're isolated that way. There's a number of things that affect us uniquely.
Right.
Versus Middletown, Jamestown, where at least you got a bridge.
Right.
We have to pay a toll. We got
Might be falling down, but we have a bridge.
And I will add to it, that's another perception thing, Sven, because, we were making those inroads. And that was one of my questions was to you, is that we were making the inroads at the State House. We went up a couple of times under a former town manager. And as far as, the senators and our reps said, you got to keep doing this. And then COVID hit when they closed the building. So I guess the question would be not just for you, it's for the other applicants also, is that what's the bottom line of what you can do for us that we can't do for ourselves?
Right.
And I've had a lot of questions. I've heard you answer a lot of questions and other applicants have said the same thing. You need to do X. You need to you.
Yeah.
So I guess I would ask you, what can you do for us that we can't do for ourselves?
I didn't want to be presumptuous and say we. I didn't want to, get too far over my skis. So that's why I said you. I think that the big difference, and I think COVID has taught us one thing, is that perseverance on your advocate's part has changed in the way we do our job and the way we persevere. So, I think now more than ever, relationships and positive relationships with members and the governor's staff, not just the governor, not just the speaker, the Senate president, but with the key people below them, staff members and things of that sort, and having a reputation that they're going to open the door to you because their prior experiences with you have been positive. You may have not always agreed, but they were respectful disagreements. There was professionalism. There was a policy focus, those kinds of things. So in our case, I think the answer to the question is perseverance and pushing and making sure that your voice is getting heard. And I think it's harder now on one level, but a lot of the excuses that people have used probably to you all, i.e. it's too hard to get there, we can't come in the wintertime, you can't get there. Well, everybody does everything by Zoom now. So there's no excuse for people not having meetings and not taking meetings because, I represent Delta Dental of Rhode Island. You could throw, it's a wedge from their parking lot to the State House parking lot, and we do every meeting by Zoom. So it's just about perseverance, and it's about getting the commitment and getting the right team to work for you. So making sure you have the highest level of the caliber of the team and you're not getting dumped down to somebody else, someone more junior. So in my case, I'm the lead on all our government relations files. So clients. So I sit there and I will help you strategize that out. There will be things that you will have to do as a town council just because sometimes there's only so much that the advocate can do. You've got to do some of this work. But I don't think it's exclusively on your shoulders. It's going to be on our shoulders. The other thing is, I think we need to help you think differently and think creatively. Several times we've heard change the lens and do different things. Sometimes you just got to think about things a little bit differently. And sometimes I think, particularly now in the era of COVID, I think people are thinking differently. And I hate to use the expressions like outside the box and all that other stuff, but I actually think that this Speaker of the House actually responds better to things that are unique, that aren't the same old tired, banging my tin cup. Everybody wants money. Everybody needs money. The speaker will say to you a million times, okay, once you're done giving him the overview, then he wants to drill down to the next level. So we've kind of stopped talking about the obvious stuff and gotten right to the meat of the issues really, really quickly. It's been a huge difference in meetings, huge difference in meetings. His staff is getting a little bit more professional. He's made some upgrades there. I'm stealing one of them, as I think I mentioned at the outset, but nonetheless. So that's the way I think it, that's why I think it happens. And I think with this governor in particular, he's very hands-on himself. And he's got a couple key staff people. Knowing who the right people are and who not to waste your time with is really, really critical. Same thing in congressional delegations. And, you know, I just think for you all in the beginning, it's just going to be banging, 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 because that's what you've got to do to change the dialogue, or to start that dialogue again, restart that dialogue, and then stay in that door and stay after it. You know, that's the way I see it.
Yeah, no, we haven't had any issues getting heard. What I'm asking.
Well, I mean, the last 2 years have been.
The last 2 years is, yeah, it's been, you know, the COVID whatnot, but we have a dollar amount from one of the applicants. Could you give us a ballpark as to what your services would cost the town?
Right, and I was just with that applicant on the way over, and I was surprised that they didn't tell me what it was.
Yeah, we hadn't.
But they did say, because I didn't put a dollar amount in because I wasn't sure we were supposed to. So anyway, so, you know, so it depends. So is my answer. It depends what kind of a relationship you're looking for. If you're looking for that 6-month General Assembly where we start talking to you on December 21st, and then we're done talking to you on June 30th, you know, it's, you know, I don't know, $5,500 a month. If it's going to be a little bit lengthier, and I strongly advocate for November 1st to June 30th, so you have a couple months of kind of ramping up, and if it's just General Assembly and Governor. So the congressional delegations are just a little bit different because their timeframes are slightly different, but they fit within the context of the General Assembly schedule for the most part on the big appropriation bills that he was asking about.
Right, and we also have a very wonderful relationship with our Reed's office, White House's office. There's no that's not starting from scratch, as well as Jim Langevin's office.
Good. Yeah, good.
I think we all have those phone numbers. We can pick up the phone and we actually get an answer. So that's not.
So if we went in that longer term, I would probably drop the monthly dollar down, you know, so it'd be kind of a $400 to $4,500 a month kind of a thing. I recognize that, you know, you're not Verizon, and I recognize you're not, you know, DraftKings. So we try to price it to our audience, and we try to respect the fact that you've got a budget. And I don't know what your budget is, if that's even within it or not, but those are kind of the general parameters that I would give you for now.
We don't have anything appropriated in this from last financial town meeting. We're offering you some wampum.
We don't have a budget.
We don't have a budget for this, but we do have contingency, so it's okay for this legislative session.
Yep, sure.
So that was just a question we wanted to ask.
Sure.
But I want to go back to the Zoom thing. I hate Zoom, and I think that works out. That's all good and well for the the state above North Kingston, I guess it is, wherever that line is. And I feel like we're not in any better shape than Westerly sometimes in getting representation in Providence. It's getting people. We keep going back to going to Providence, and it's very important because I used to do it, and if you showed up from Block Island, by the time the meeting was half over, everybody else in the room was mad at you because they kept saying, you know, Block Island showed up and so didn't. But getting somebody on the boat to come out here a little late, and not quite on a day like today, but not in the summertime, in the spring, when you really get the impact that everything comes to Block Island on that boat, that everything that comes out here is transported. Everything that, you know, Amazon doesn't have some magic drone delivery service. And I really don't, I think the people who come out in the summer are just taken with the summer And I mean, I know people who own houses out here who pay utility bills all year and who've said to me, well, I don't really ever think of Block Island as being there if I'm not there.
Hmm.
And I don't, and unfortunately, the first time I heard that, I thought, well, good grief. And then, you know, you hear it more than once, you think, my God, this is the way these people really think.
Mhm.
We don't exist because it's bizarre.
Yeah,
But, so I think it's both having, to me at least, having somebody, and it's having somebody who can, and one of the reasons we're looking at this is having somebody who's in Providence regularly,
Mhm.
not, you know, a trip here, a trip there,
Mhm.
and getting people down here,
Mhm.
both.
yeah, and I
That's
think
half
that,
the
and I
battle.
think that that's smart, and I think that that's the way you should do this, and I think, you know, there was a story, I think Brian Amaral wrote a story a couple of weeks back about municipalities and other governments starting to hire lobbyists and communication help consultants. And we were one of the voices in that story. And, you know, we said, look, you know, governments, cities, towns, quasis, they need advocacy just as much as DraftKings or Verizon or anyone else does. And we went through it with him, and the reporter was like, and he kind of had a negative view of it at first because Kathy Gregg has a negative view of it. But we sat down with him. We said, look, you know, look at the budgets of these places, look at the level, look at the issues, you know, et cetera, the complexity of what's going on. And he walked away. And again, if you hadn't seen the story, it was a much different story than he came in to write. So I think it is important, and I think it's important for you to have people in representing you that will convey those messages to those key people on a daily basis. And I think having someone in Providence is very smart. And, you know, I hope you pick me because I'm very excited about this. This will be, I think we do a great job for you. And I think it's important. I think you need to do it. I think you need to, I keep thinking about NFL football coaches. I'm like stunned that Brian Flores got fired by the Miami Dolphins. So I don't mean to borrow my special.
No, I.
Go ahead.
So it's just this carousel. It's just this carousel of every year, the team never gets better, but they just fire the coach. And I think that they need to switch it around. And that's why I think I look at people like, you know, governments, town councils and things like you all. You've got your daily life jobs you're going to do. Then you're going to do your town council work. And then you're going to, advocate at the state level too. I just don't know how you do it all. It's just not probably humanly possible. And I think you do need to have a consultant that will do the work for you and be that voice, consistent voice for you as you move forward. I lost my NFL analogy.
That's okay. No, stop.
That's fine.
It's good. You don't need anything else. Thank you. Does the council have any other questions?
I don't. This is great. It's terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was great to be here. I appreciate it very much. And it was nice I hope the ride back is nice and smooth as it was here this morning. But
Is it 2:00?
2:30, I think.
It's 2:30.
Yeah.
We can give you a ride.
I'm going to have the other guys come back and get me. Yeah. So, but anyway, thanks very much.
What story should we make up for them?
Yeah, just tell, oh boy.
They were so offended by you.
They were offended by me?
No.
Oh.
What story should you tell them?
Maybe we should keep you here for another 15, 20 minutes, just like an extra half hour that they didn't have.
Yeah.
And then you won't have to say a word.
Yeah. So, you know, same thing with Jeff and Rick yesterday. You know, they're really two good guys. And you know, Alan's new to this government relations biz, but, you know, he was mayor for a long time. And, you know, Brian Jordan's been doing this, you know, probably not as long as me, but pretty close. But, you know, it's a really good team over there too. So in my opinion, you got three, you know, good choices to choose from. So I can't say anything
Very nice.
negative about them. They're all good guys. So, but anyway, and thank you for your time.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it very much.
Appreciate
All
that.
right.
Thank you.
Okay.
What is happening in Zion up there, the beautiful complex of buildings in Barrington?
Which, what is it?
Zion,
Yeah, what's happening there?
Yeah.
Nothing.
sad.
Yeah, it's kind of there's a small little Christian something or other happening in there, but it's not anything substantial. You know, that's been a place that they've talked about different types of housing projects and things, and it just never gets off the drawing board there, so,
The still former Zion Bible Institute.
yeah,
It's magnificent.
yeah, it's a beautiful piece of property.
By the way, I think our sea level rise committee got the last presentation of your new planning director while she was still working at CRMC. She's terrific.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, terrific. And our town manager just retired.
You were right. You were right.
Yeah, stuff, yeah, so.
She was great.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you.
I grew up in Warwick though, my wife. Thank you. It's nice to meet you all. Thank you very much so much.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn, but maybe not yet. What's the next step in this process?
We should put on the agenda for the 19th if you would like.
Could we put it on the agenda for the 19th, or as that's looking robust, as as Millie said the other day?
It's us.
Should we ask for pricing options?
I'm sorry.
Should we ask them
If
for
you want
pricing
to,
options?
if you want to have to do that.
In writing? I think so.
Yeah.
Well, they agree.
Send out a, all right, yeah, not adjourned yet.
And we're public.
Send out a memo asking for the pricing options, as Keith indicated.
And thank you.
We will set a meeting to discuss these applicants. I think time's of the essence. I can make myself available more earlier than the 19th.
Same.
Uh,
I think they should just leave the way.
yes. Either way,
48-hour notice, so if you want, maybe one, you want something.
Well, we won't, you think we'll hear from them by then?
I can tell them that we need something.
I think Monday's a holiday.
Monday's a holiday.
Martin Luther King.
okay, so I guess we really can't really do anything before. We can't really do anything beforehand the 19th then.
I mean, I can write to them, ask them to bring us pricing options back, if you want to write to them to the contract. If you want to get something, say you gotta get by new plan offers, and if you want to get close to those.
So Monday being, let's make calendar. Monday's, what's the date on Monday?
17th.
Okay, the 19th will be fine, because we've already got that. I mean, well, we could do the 18th or whatever have you, or.
I'm assuming it'll be in closed session. 'Cause it's
I assume it's-
talking about dollars and potential contracts. It's a question.
We can put it either way. I don't think it needs to be in closed session.
I think it should be when we're talking about dollars and such afterwards and building.
I'll look into that. If that-
Let's keep our options open.
Yeah, leave it open, but again,
Maybe you do-
Yeah, I want to be fully transparent. I just don't want to have discussions about pluses and minuses and dollars. Because they're all going to be watching it. Oh, as they should.
I'll look and see if we can do an option on the closed session before the.
Okay.
Meeting, like at 6:30 or something.
okay. Is that it for this meeting?
And then something on the public agenda.
Like a microphone for your table. Motion to adjourn. Second by Sven. All those in favor, Mark?
Aye.
I'm in favor, Sven.
Aye.
Martha? Keith?
Yes, sir.
Motion carries 5-0 to adjourn.